My name is Sean Meyer. I'm the co-founder of the Back from the Brink campaign with my dear colleague and friend Ira Helfand, who's over here, and you'll hear from him in a little bit. We're delighted to have you all here, and thank you for your support, and to talk about our campaign and the imperative to get rid of nuclear weapons, and of course to honor four wonderful leaders and public servants in our community. And they are Congressman Jim McGovern, who cannot be here, but we'll be hearing him via video, and a member of his staff is here, Kobe Gardner-Levine. I don't know what Kobe is. Nice to have you, Kobe. And State Senator Joe Comaford, and Senator Comaford also cannot be here. I think she was called away to California for by the majority leader asked her to go out there. So that sounded fairly important. And State Representative Sabadosa is, I believe, right here. Thank you very much. And lastly, Sister Mary Caritas. And she, unfortunately, cannot be here as well. But Paul Manzanoni will be speaking for, where's Paul? Will be saying a few words on her behalf. So before, I'd like to say a few words, but I also want to just take a moment to thank the folks from the Drake. What do you think of this wonderful, wonderful space? I've already seen several shows here, and please take good care of your bartender back there, and please come here often and listen to wonderful live music. And I also like to just acknowledge a few colleagues from the campaign who are in the room. Brennan Tierney is here somewhere. And Bruce Brennan and Jeremy Love, who came down from New Hampshire today. And dear friend and colleague on our steering committee, Peter Wilk, right here. And so I think you've all seen the drinks, and we have some food and refreshments there. Please enjoy. And one thing we have is right over here, we have a table with some literature in our Back from the Brink website up on a computer. But next to that, we have a table where we're asking you all at some point if you wanted to take a couple minutes and write down the name of a person or two, or maybe an organization that you're part of or that you are fond of, that you believe should be involved in this campaign. So just write it down on a sticky note, and really you're going to help us do our job, because a big part of this is getting lots of individuals and organizations involved. So please do that at some point if you can. And that could be, I wrote down Beyonce and Jay-Z. It'd be kind of nice to have. Maybe there's some, TikTok influencer. I don't even know what that is, but my daughter could tell me, I suppose. So I wanted to just say a few words. Actually, I wanted to sort of emphasize sort of three words tonight, and they are urgency, agency, and opportunity. And we start with urgency, and I think I don't really sort of need to say too much about the sort of moment we're in, and with what's happening in Ukraine, with many experts say that we're closer to nuclear war than we've ever been. Of course, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I was actually born during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was pretty bad then, but there's certainly there's a great urgency to this moment, and the threat is very, very real. And I think there's also the threat of the existing Cold War era policies, and if you've read some about us, basically the sort of the heart of our campaign is 5 policy points. And most of the policies that we're trying to change are Cold War era policies that are both dangerous, very dangerous, and unnecessary. And I'm just going to run through them just for the benefit of us. So the first one is that currently the United States reserves the right to use nuclear weapons first, as we did in Japan in 1945. We're trying to get a policy, a no first use policy, which is basically a declaratory policy that we won't use these things first. And we think that's a very wise thing to do. Currently, there are hundreds and hundreds of U.S. nuclear missiles on hair trigger alert, ready to be launched at a moment's notice. And that's very dangerous and very unnecessary. And so we think that that policy should be changed. And the one that I think bothers many of us more than any of them is the current policy that gives the authority to launch nuclear weapons to one person. And anyone know who that person is? Yeah, it's the President of the United States. And, you know, I had a big problem with the last president having that authority, but I have a problem with any single person having the ability to destroy the planet. We're looking to change that policy, and there's many proposals on the table of how you can bring more people into that decision making. Fourth is there is a plan to rebuild the entire nuclear arsenal. Every bomb, every sub, every bomber, every missile, to the tune of $1.5 to $2 trillion over the next several decades. That is just, think of all the things that we could do with just a small portion of those funds. And most importantly, the key bullet point of our 5 policy points is that we believe that the United States should enter into negotiations with all of the other 8 nuclear armed states for a verifiable agreement to eliminate all nuclear weapons. And that's really we are a nuclear abolition campaign. So that's a bit of the urgency in some of our policies. So let me talk about agency, because that's what we're all about here. It's about giving every single one of us, every single person in this room, a voice and a role in something that affects us all, affects our families, our communities, and is truly an existential threat to humanity and all we hold dear. And this campaign has been quite successful in giving people, all of us, a way to be involved. We've passed resolutions in communities. Folks can get involved with congressional efforts and letter writing, and to give us all a voice. And that's really the key to building the political power that we need. So lastly, I want to talk about opportunity. It is a tough global climate right now, but I've been doing this work for a very long time, and I believe at the bottom of my heart that we can get rid of nuclear weapons. It is possible to do this. It is not going to be easy, but it is possible to do this. And I would argue that we've already seen a lot of progress. I was just reading earlier today that at the height of the Cold War, some 128,000 nuclear weapons have been built throughout the nuclear age. 128,000. I think at the height of the Cold War, about 60,000 were deployed. Today, there's about 13,000 nuclear weapons on the planet. And there are examples of, even in the darkest of times, change and positive things have happened. So I mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was October of 1962. In August of 1963, less than a year later, the U.S. and the Soviet Union agreed to the Limited Test Ban Treaty. In October 1962, tensions were pretty high between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Fast forward to the early 1980s. This event is from the freeze to back from the brink. In the early 1980s, 1983 in particular, tensions between the U.S. and the Soviets were quite high. And then less than 2 years later, Reagan and Gorbachev got together. They actually got together in Iceland and got very close to almost agreeing to eliminate all nuclear weapons. But they did end up agreeing to some landmark agreements, particularly what was the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement. So again, it went from serious tension to really positive change. And today, we have, thanks to the work of many, many nations in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of activists around the world, we have a global treaty called the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that was signed in 2017. We now have 91 countries have signed this treaty, and 68 have ratified it. And basically, the nations of the world and the people of the world are getting fed up with the 9 nuclear weapon states, holding these things over us. And that is an opportunity. And the TPNW, what's called the Ban Treaty, has been very inspiring to us here in this country, and we see that as an opportunity as well. So we're going to move to talk to recognizing our honorees in a moment. But what I'd like to do, I have the great privilege of inviting my daughter, Selena, to the stage. And what Selena's going to do, maybe ground us a little bit, she is going to read a poem by Richard Wilbur. Richard Wilbur is probably one of the most celebrated poets of the 20th century. He went to school right over there at Amherst College and actually taught at Amherst and at Smith for several years. And the poem that Richard Wilbur wrote was called Advice to a Prophet. And Selena, would you like to come up?
Hello? Actually, before I read this poem, I would like to do something quickly. Dan, he didn't know I was going to do this. Since I'm not sure if anyone else could do it, I'm going to assume someone probably would. But I would also like to say just a thank you to my dad for all the work he's put into this. I have spent the last almost 15 years of my life watching him put his entire soul into this campaign, other campaigns, in this work in general. And he has put the most attention possible that he can to this. And trust me, I've heard it, he can whistle like a shotgun blast. But I would just like us to have another round of applause for him and the work he's done. And now this quite good poem. Advice to a Prophet, Richard Wilbur. When you come, as you soon must, to the streets of our city, mad-eyed from stating the obvious, not proclaiming our fault, but begging us, in God's name, to have self-pity. Spare us all word of the weapons, their force and range, the long numbers that rocket the mind. Our slow, unreckoning hearts will be left behind, unable to fear what is too strange. Nor shall you scare us with talk of death of the race. How should we dream of this place without us? The sun mere fire, the leaves untroubled about us, a stone look on the stone's face. Speak of the world's own change, though we cannot conceive of an undreamt thing. We know to our cost how the dreamt cloud crumbles, the blackened vines are the vines are blackened by frost. How the view alters, we could believe, if you told us so, that the white-tailed deer will slip into perfect shade, grown perfectly shy. The lark avoids the reaches of our eye, the jack pine loses knuckled grip. On the cold ledge and every torrent burn, as xanthus once its gliding trout stunned in a twinkling. What should we be, the dolphin's ark, the dove's return? These things in which we have seen ourselves and spoken. Ask us, prophet, how shall we call our natures forth when that live tongue is all dispelled, that glass obscured or broken, in which we have said the rose of our love and the clean horse of our courage, in which beheld the singing locust of the soul unshelled, and all we mean or wish to mean? Ask us. Ask us whether the wordless rose our hearts shall fall, come demanding, whether there shall be a lofty or long standing, when the bronze annals of the oak tree close.
Well, that was pretty wonderful. And she also asked me, Selena is an amazing poet in her own right. If you are interested in reading some of her poetry, you can find it at allpoetry.com under Selena K. Meyer. Is that right? She's amazing, if I don't say so myself. So I'd like to turn things over to Ira. Okay. Dr. Ira Helfand.
I have the very great privilege tonight of introducing our 4 honorees. The Freeze campaign back in the 1980s, the national campaign that had a huge impact, started here in Western Massachusetts. And the Freeze campaign back in the 1980s started here in Western Massachusetts. And it went on to have a huge impact across the country, largely because it had some tremendous leadership from people here in the Valley. This new campaign, sort of a Freeze campaign for our time, I think has the same potential to bring about really profound change in U.S. nuclear policy. It can lead us to a world free of nuclear weapons. And it's going to be successful also because of the efforts of many, many people. But we've been very blessed to have some extraordinary leadership from people here in our community in Western Massachusetts as well. And we really want to honor these people today. 3 of them are legislators. I live in Northampton. I have a perfect trifecta. I have Lindsay Sabadoza as my representative, Joe Comerford as my state senator, and Jim McGovern as my congressman. How can we possibly do that, right? We want to honor all 3 of them tonight. They have done extraordinary work to promote the cause of a nuclear-free world. Lindsay and Joe have introduced into the state legislature the Back to the Brink resolution, the last 2 sessions. They've also introduced a resolution to create a commission to study what the effects of nuclear war would be here in the Commonwealth as a way of educating people about this whole issue and helping to build the understanding necessary if we're going to mobilize people to take action. Jim McGovern, has been our representative for decades at this point. He's been a leader on many different issues, as have Joe and Lindsay. And on this particular issue, he has been the person who has introduced the legislation in the United States Congress in support of the Back from the Brink campaign. He introduced it in the last session, the session that we're currently in. We'll be introducing it again in the new session. And we hope to move this resolution forward with a companion bill in the U.S. Senate and to really use this as an effective organizing tool around the country. And Jim, as you all know, is somebody who not only talks the talk, he walks the walk, as any of you who followed his 43-mile march from Springfield to Greenfield last week are aware. I think the thing about all 3 of these people is that in addition to representing us, which is an important part of their job, they also lead us. And we don't see that very often in people in the legislature. You go and talk to people and they say, well, that's interesting, but I'm not sure. I got to hold my finger up and say which way the wind's blowing. Lindsay and Joe and Jim do not. They know it's right, and they lead us. And they provide leadership to this whole movement, and we're deeply, deeply indebted to them for that. The other person that we want to honor tonight is Sister Mary Caritas, who many of you may know, many of you who live up in this part of the valley may not. Sister Caritas is the President Emerita of Mercy Medical Center, Mercy Hospital. Sister Caritas is in her 100th year. She turned 99 in August of this year. And I can talk about her age because she's very proud of this fact, as well she should be. She's an extraordinary person. I first met her back in the 1980s when I worked in the emergency room at Mercy Hospital. She was already something of a legend then for the leadership she provided to that institution. Since her retirement, she has continued to be active promoting healthcare and promoting a number of other important social causes. And on this issue, she has been just incredible. incredibly dynamic leader. She played a critical role in getting the Springfield City Council to endorse the Back from the Brink campaign, and getting the Holyoke City Council to endorse the Back from the Brink campaign, and also in setting up a meeting in which we got Congressman Richie Neal to endorse the Back from the Brink campaign. Whenever we take her into a meeting, Sister Caritas is the cleanup hitter. We always have her go last because she's got a mind like a steel trap, and she always remembers the stuff that the rest of us have forgotten to bring up. And she also, as everyone in Springfield knows, you don't say no to Sister Caritas. I'm so sorry that she is not able to be with us tonight. For those of you who've never met her, Sister Caritas stands about 4 feet 10 inches tall. She stands ramrod straight. I wish I had her posture. She's indefatigable. If she were here, she would be bounding up the stairs in a minute to talk with you. And we're just so fortunate to have her as a leader in our community to work with our legislative leaders in helping to promote this campaign. So Sean's going to be back up, and we'll present our tokens of appreciation to them, and a big round of applause, please, for all four of them.
Thank you, Ira. So we are delighted, as Ira just said. We have a small gift for each of our honorees, and I wanted to just sort of mention a little bit about it. It's a book of poetry from Martin Espada, who many of you likely know. He's a celebrated poet as well, and we thought it was appropriate just because he's been a champion for working people and immigrants throughout his career, and a champion for justice. So we thought it was a nice gift. So what we'd like to do is we have a book of his latest book of poetry, Floaters, and so we'd like to give that to each person. And so I'd like to ask Representative Sabadosa to come up and perhaps say a few words. And thank you so much for being here and for your leadership.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you this evening. When I was first elected to office, I was just thinking about this. I made a commitment to myself because oftentimes we end up having to vote on very difficult things. But I needed to be able to follow my moral compass. And so I decided that I was not going to vote on anything that did harm. I was not going to vote on anything that increased incarceration rates. And I was not going to vote in favor of anything that put greater burden on those who are economically disadvantaged. And those were my three parameters, right? The things will get hard, sometimes we have to make compromises, but those are the three things that are my lines in the sand, because we all need lines in the sand, right? So when I was first presented with the idea of these two bills, the Back from the Brink bill and the Nuclear Commission, they just made sense, because they fit within that. And it has given me the opportunity to talk to colleagues constantly about these issues. And it is fascinating to watch people who you might not think are ideologically aligned with you make connections. So for example, I have so many colleagues who think these bills make sense because they're concerned about the environment. And how can you possibly want to expand the use of nuclear weapons and care about the environment? They don't work, right? Those things don't coexist. And so I'm happy reputation as the person who talks about getting rid of nuclear weapons. It's a good reputation to have in the State House. And I will share recently, because I also, my first term, got to pass a bill for the city of Northampton that it was a home rule petition that said the city was not going to work with contractors who maintain, produce, manufacture anything related to nuclear weapons. And so that was my first time that I got to have those conversations. So now when I talk to people in House leadership, they're yes, nuclear weapons, that's you, we understand. Those are the people that you represent. And so this place does have that reputation as leaders, and I'm so proud to be the vehicle through which your passion and your work is explained to the Massachusetts State House. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Are we going to try to do this video now? So we, is that?
Why don't you have Kobe come up and then just do it now?
Okay. Kobe, why don't you come on up and say a few words? As I mentioned before, this is Kobe Gardner-Levine, who works with Congressman McGovern. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who came out tonight. Before we play this video, I just want to say on behalf of the congressman that he views nuclear weapons as an incredibly powerful threat to this world, and I want to reiterate his commitment to a world without nuclear weapons, as well as the utmost respect that he has for Back to the Brink and for grassroots organizations and local, state, and national leaders who are working to make this a reality. So for that reason, thank you to all of you for being here tonight. I'll be back up here in just a moment, actually, more on that later. But at this point, I'll turn it over to the remarks from Congressman Jim McGovern. Alrighty. Senator Joe Comerford couldn't be here with us tonight, but in her absence, she asked if I would deliver a few thoughts on her behalf. So the following is from Senator Joe Comerford. Heartfelt thanks to the Back from the Brink campaign for tonight's recognition. I so much wish I could join you, but I was asked by the Senate President to attend a conference on budgeting in San Diego because we understand that budgets are a reflection of our values. That's certainly so when it comes to the federal government and Pentagon spending, but it's also the case at the state level. I have long loved Back from the Brink's leadership and work for a world free from nuclear weapons, needed now more than ever as we grapple with the horrors and nuclear threats in Ukraine. I am honored to partner with you in the Massachusetts legislature, as well as work on your behalf with folks like Representative Sabadosa and Congressman Jim McGovern. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe. Our last honoree, as mentioned, is Sister Mary Caritas, and we're going to ask Paul Manzanone. Paul, here's Paul, a dear friend of Sister Caritas's, to come up and say some words on her behalf.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ira. Sister personally got me involved in Back from the Brink, and it's been an honor working with Sister and Ira on that campaign. She couldn't be here this evening, but she's a woman of few words and great action. And although she's probably 18 inches shorter than me, she's 40 feet taller in many ways. She would want to thank those top executives from Mercy Hospital and Trinity Health who are here this evening. I need to single them out because they would. Former Chairman John Schoberg, my wife Anna, Michelle Thiru, Chair of Mercy Hospital, Rob Bruce, Chief Administrative Officer, Deb Bizzoli, the President, and my buddy Dan Keenan, who runs government relations. She is honored that you guys are here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We don't have much left of the program, but I wanted to so those are, we were happy to honor these four folks. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize and honor my friend and colleague, Ira Helfand here. This guy's a rock star, you know. I mean, he's, I think we met maybe sometime in the 80s, but we've known each other for a very long time, and he's just a force to be reckoned with, and is a founder of Physicians for Social Responsibility. He serves on the International Steering Committee of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, and he just never stops. He's going to Korea in a few days. He's all over I don't know how he does it. I certainly don't know how he did it when he was still had his practice. So I was like, how is it possible? But I just really want to express my thanks and appreciation to you, Ira, for all you Brendan, are you gonna? Okay. So I'm gonna invite Brendan Tierney up to say a few words about the campaign.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. My name is Brendan Tierney. I work as a fundraising and development consultant with Back from the Brink. I'm also a grad student at UMass and teaching 8th grade civics at Amherst Middle School. So that's my day job. It's my night job. And I've been actively organizing on this issue since I was visiting my partner's family in Japan and got the opportunity to visit the museums in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and had been very active in climate justice organizing. And that experience was a really sort of eye-opening, heart-wrenching, disturbing experience, and really kind of brought me into action to get involved. So I would like to start by recognizing and thanking each of the sponsors for this event. Your generous contributions helped to make this event possible and also helped to make our work possible. So I'm just going to go through those names. So a big thank you to Ira Helfand, Paul Mancinoni, Margot Zallen, Christian Appy, Catherine Baker, Nathaniel Butler, Christine Herman, Matthew Hoey and Kellyanne Mahoney, Steve Jones, Michael Clare and Andrea Avazian, Marissa Labozetti and Martin Wohl, Cynthia McBain, Laura Reed, Peter Worth, Ronald Ackerman and Cleo Gorman, Janet and Robert Bissell, Brian Boyles, Hank Aprishkin, Ellen Ferranti, Jim Levy, Sean Meyer, Peter Moyer, Rebecca Neymark, Barry Negrosh, Henry Rosenberg, Flo Rosenstock, Stan Shapiro, David Spence, Seth Tuller, Sarah Weinberger, Tim Walter, Peter Wilk, Arlene and David Cox, David Katz, Mark Moulton, and Bruce Stedman. Thank you so much. And if I missed your name or mispronounced your name, I sincerely apologize. So I wanted to just quickly give a few updates from the Back from the Brink campaign over the past calendar year. I'm excited to share that the Back from the Brink campaign has been endorsed by 425 national and local organizations to date. And highlights from this year include an endorsement from the United States Episcopal Church and from leaders such as former Secretary of Defense William Perry, Reverend Liz Theo-Harris, the national co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, and Archbishop John Western of Santa Fe, among many others. As well, to date, 73 resolutions supporting Back from the Brink's policy platform have been adopted by local and state governments. This year we were thrilled to welcome Chicago, the largest Midwestern city to do so, as well as Holyoke, Massachusetts, Marshfield, Massachusetts, Minneapolis, Salem, Oregon, St. Paul, Minnesota, as well as the Rhode Island State Senate. So among many others, this campaign is certainly growing in its reach all across the country. And on the federal level, as Jim McGovern mentioned, the House Resolution 1185 has been introduced, will be reintroduced next year, and will certainly be a focal point of our organizing efforts. Back from the Brink this year was a national mobilizing partner for the Poor People's Campaign June 18th Moral March on Washington. And also, what I'm really excited about is this year Back from the Brink launched what we're calling our hub model, which is having local hubs in communities all across the country as sort of to have as a place-based organizing center. So I think we have maybe 12 or so around the country and hoping to expand that. And there's also a very active hub and Back from the Brink organizers here in Western Massachusetts. So if you're looking for a place to get more involved, this is a great place to do so. And Back from the Brink has accomplished all of this and much more, as a primarily volunteer-run and grassroots effort. We have no full-time staff. We've had very little funding and, again, only consulting work, so no paid staff. And I want to just quickly share a little anecdote. I worked for 2.5 years at the Peace Development Fund, which is a public foundation 1 street parallel to here on North Prospect Street, which was founded in 1983, sort of at the height of the Cold War, as Sean was alluding to earlier, and was really founded to be a philanthropic vehicle for nuclear disarmament, freeze movement of the time. And when I was working there, I had this awesome opportunity to work with this great filmmaker to create a video in honor of PDF's 40th anniversary. And I got to talk with like dozens of people and learn more about PDF's history. And just one thing that stood out to me was a conversation with Meg Gage, who some of you might know, she's here in Amherst. And I was asking her, she was one of the founders of Peace Development Fund, and we were asking, like, why was Peace Development Fund created? And she essentially said that there was very little funding and support for grassroots organizing at the time. Right? There was funding for the think tanks, the research centers, the policymakers, but there was very little funding for the grassroots organizing. So they created a foundation to fund exclusively grassroots organizing. And unfortunately, we have a very similar situation today. Back from the Brink is one of the leading grassroots efforts working toward the abolition of nuclear weapons, yet we have had difficulty securing support from foundations. Simply put, the philanthropic sector does not adequately resource the grassroots sector. And look at what we're up against. The United States spent close to $45 billion on its nuclear arsenals in 2021, while a global pandemic and climate change raged on. But Back from the Brink has been making progress in this regard. We've more than doubled what we've raised last year, and I like to think that we are at an inflection point as we try to raise the necessary funds to hire more staff to manage our growing network and hire organizers to get on the ground and do the work. And one of the ways that we've been doing that and having success in is by raising funds from individuals like you in a sort of more grassroots style. So I'd like to share that we had a goal to raise $10,000 for this event. And I'm really happy to share that we've raised, my last calculation, about $8,600. Yeah. And so with that in mind, I would humbly ask for your continued financial support, or to consider making a contribution to Back from the Brink. And in doing so, I'd like you to consider what amount of support you could give tonight, knowing that you would be part of the solution for trying to prevent nuclear war. Right? Think about a year from now, where if we are successful, the working toward a world free of nuclear weapons could be a rallying cry in the 2024 election, right? Where we might steer away from the arms race that we are speeding into right now. So in conclusion, we've made some great progress, but there is much more work to be done, and we need your support in order to do it. So thank you again to each of you, and also thank you to Western Massachusetts for being a leading voice on this issue for decades. I think that is and just one last comment. So feel free to come talk to us over at the table. There's a way to give an online contribution or a place to write a check, if that's possible. So thank you.
Could you mention that our next local meeting is a week from tomorrow on Zoom at 7 p.m. Come talk to me if you want to attend.
I love it. Thank you. So just so people can hear that with the mic, the next local Back from the Brink chapter meeting is next Monday at 7 o'clock. A week from tomorrow at 7 o'clock on Zoom, and you can come talk to our friend Henry Rosenberg here if you'd like to get involved with that. So thanks again, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Brennan. So, you're probably getting sick of listening to my voice, but you're gonna have to. So we'd like to close with some words from President Kennedy. So in June of 1963, just a few months before he was assassinated, he gave a commencement speech at American University. And that whole speech was about peace and the need for peace. In fact, that speech also served as an announcement for the resumption of high-level negotiations with the Soviets on that limited test ban treaty that I mentioned, which then was agreed to 2 months later. And so what I thought we would do is, the speech is long, but what I'd like to do is read a few excerpts from this speech, just to sort of, again, sort of coming back to this notion that peace is possible and it's necessary. And just this speech is well regarded as sort of the cornerstone of speeches about peace. I have therefore chosen this time and this place to discuss a topic on which ignorance too often abounds, and the truth is too rarely perceived, yet it is the most important topic on earth: world peace. What kind of peace do I mean? What kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I'm talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time. I speak of peace because of the new face of war. And again, remember, this is 1961. Total war makes no sense in an age when great powers can maintain large and relatively invulnerable nuclear forces and refuse to surrender without resort to those forces. It makes no sense in an age when a single nuclear weapon contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied forces in the Second World War. It makes no sense in an age when the deadly poisons produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and sea to the far corners of the globe and to generations yet unborn. I realize that the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuer fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent tasks. Some say it is useless to speak of world peace or world law or world disarmament, and it will be useless until the leaders of the Soviet Union adopt a more enlightened attitude. I hope they do. I believe we can help them do that, but I also believe that we must re-examine our own attitude as individuals and as a nation. For our attitude is essential as theirs. And every graduate of the school, every thoughtful citizen who despairs of war and wishes to bring peace should begin by looking inward, by examining his own attitude toward the possibilities of peace, toward the Soviet Union, toward the course of the Cold War, and toward freedom and peace here at home. First, let us examine our attitude for peace itself. Too many of us think it's impossible. Too many think it's unreal. But it is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe they can do it again. And that's what I was talking about when I said I do this work. I believe that getting rid of nuclear weapons is possible. So let us focus instead on more practical, more attainable peace, based not on a sudden revolution in human nature, but on a gradual evolution in human institutions, on a series of concrete actions and effective agreements which are of interest of all concerned. There's no single simple key to this peace, no grand or magic formula to be adopted by one or two powers. Genuine peace must be the product of many nations the sum of many acts. It must be dynamic, not static, changing to meet the challenges of each new generation, for peace is a process, a way of solving problems. And that's why we're here. So thank you all very much for coming. Again, we have a computer over there with our website up. Feel free to peruse that. We've got a sample T-shirt there just to sort of give you an idea of how cool it would be to have one. And please stick around and let's talk to each other a little bit. And thank you so much for coming.